Hello, readers by eyes and by ears. This is Mari-chan, and welcome to my channel. Today, we are doing a not-so-generic summary on why you should read YUWU by Robabu Churro, or simply Meat Bun. Now, as this is a summary but not so generic, I am going to do my best to keep it as spoiler-free as possible and generic as it pertains to the characters, while still giving you a very thorough explanation on why you should read it if you have not read it. And I guess for anyone who has read it and just wants to watch this video, yay! So let's go ahead and get started. I have got 4 major themes that I want to share with you all, and we're going to begin with the first one, which is love as redemption, not reward, and shared burden. So one thing that I have noticed while reading YUWU is that it constantly challenges the idea that love is reward for virtue or forgiveness. So we have the main characters, Moshi and Gumong, where their love is built on grief, misunderstanding, betrayal, and atonement. And what makes it powerful is that it survives not because of things being forgotten, but because they choose each other in spite of it all in the end. And their love becomes this act of redemption, this act of saving, not only for themselves, but for their country, their soldiers, and the generations that have been scarred by war. As one quote said, they tasted too much bitterness and separation. They didn't want others to suffer. That was all. But the reason that I say this theme is love as redemption, not reward, is because also throughout the story, the thing that is constantly brought up is that love should be rewarded because of virtue. I won't say obviously who the characters are. You'll find out very, very early in volume 1, but it implies that just because someone does a specific thing for you means that you need to dedicate all of your love and affection to that person. That is their just reward. So that is why I think this story is saying, hey, love is not a reward. Love is redemption. And ultimately, love is just who you love. It is who you give your heart to, regardless of anything else. And so then, of course, within this love as redemption and shared burden, we have the ones who bring us back. I really want to focus on this because I think it is so vital in this entire story, and that is focusing on trauma as a shared journey. Every major relationship in YUWU / Remnants of Filth is built around this idea that healing is reciprocal and costly. So for the main couple, we have one character who sacrifices himself again and again. He becomes a martyr shaped by injustice and suffering. And his love is self-erasure, basically. It's well-intentioned, but self-destructive and even destructive to the one he loves. Whereas his counterpart spends his entire story trying to undo this martyrdom and prove his love, even if it kills him. Then we have a secondary couple who mirrors this dynamic, but in a different form. There is one partner who carries the trauma and a curse, while the other quite literally scars themselves to free their loved one from this curse. Their love says, if I can take on your suffering so you can live, then I will. And I absolutely love that. But the one thing I will say, even though Remnants of Filth is filled with suffering, I do not believe that Meat Bun ever glamorizes it. It just shows that sometimes to pull someone out of the darkness, you must risk becoming the light and being burned in the process. And yet, for the characters who choose that burden, for them, it is totally worth it. That is one of the beating hearts of YUWU. Love is not the absence of pain, but the conscious choice to carry it together. And I know a lot of people dislike the saying, love is pain, and ultimately I do as well in a general sense. But in this story, love can be pain. That is what it is showing you. it can be pain, not as punishment, but as an endurance of taking on another person's trauma, guiding them through it and helping them to grow beyond it. There are going to be some cases with relationships in which you are going to have grief and strife because you are dealing with the baggage that someone has brought with them. And I love this element that Meat Bun has brought into YUWU. And one thing I think about is like Arha, because I did read that as well. So if Arha is about redemption through love and changing one's actions, being given a second chance, YUWU is about acceptance and redemption through exposure. You know, the central couple lives in this tension between secrecy and vulnerability. And for most of the series, there is a lot of hiding and misunderstanding. And the reconciliation really only comes when they finally let themselves be seen / allow themselves to see each other fully. And I like how one of the gods put it. You'll know what it is in the future. But one of the gods in the story reminds us that gods can only light the path, but the people must save themselves. And that is what this is all about the entire time. There is no higher being that is controlling everything. Everyone is given way to their own actions and they have to save themselves. And so ultimately, I would say there's just this whole dynamic of love is not necessarily about rescuing someone. It is about witnessing them. And in witnessing them, there may be saving. So big takeaway from this point is that true intimacy in YUWU means giving someone access to the parts of you that could destroy you and trusting that they'll guard you. Or as I like to say, trusting your partner with your darkness. So the next theme is going to be on parental curses, inherited sin, and the burden of ambition. So these curses in YUWU, while we do have some literal ones, these aren't the literal curses. These are psychological inheritance and trauma passed down from parents. We have two characters in this story who were both sculpted as children by their mother's obsessions. And it really gives us two similar but also very contrasting portraits of this inheritance. So we have one child who is raised to believe that love and rights must be earned through achievement, control, and perfection. That basically worth is conditional, and it is also something that is threatened. They grow up walking on this tightrope, terrified of failure, molded into a tool rather than a person. And they are stripped away of the things that they actually love to do. Then we have another child who is taught that the world owes them power that really was not theirs in the first place. And that ambition justifies cruelty. So what they inherit is not love, but resentment and mistake possession for purpose. Whereas the one before, they inherited fear. So both of these characters, they carry psychological curses into their adulthood, and they repeat or they regurgitate the damage that was done to them. And they both have to decide whether they are going to become the person they were raised to be or become the person they naturally were or the person they want to be. And I will say this also mirrors another character who was consumed by ancestral hate and ends up becoming the person or the people he hates the most. But one of the things I love about Meat Bun that I've realized, she always tends to show one side of the spectrum and another side of the spectrum. So in this story, it shows us that fate is not fixed. One character shows that inherited wounds can be challenged, that you can take the very thing that broke you and turn it into a force for compassion instead of cruelty one day, while the other shows how inheritance can devour you if you never question it. And again, I just really love how layered everything is because again, with one character, well, first off, because children are innocent, you have both of them starting out innocent, of course, but with one character, you have them becoming cruel early on in life and being cruel for the majority of the story until the end where they change their mindset. We don't really get a lot of them being not cruel, but we see the shift change. And then on the other side, I just really love how Mi Bun did this. We have a character who was naturally kind, tender, and caring, and they stayed that way for a while they questioned their parent. But when they stopped questioning, when they allowed that resentment that their parent instilled in them, that his mother instilled in him, then that is when they morphed into someone else. So we have someone basically, if you will, inherently bad, who in the end realizes that things need to change. And then we have someone who started out inherently good. And then they allow what they were taught. They let that seed fester and grow into something ugly and vile. So we have two paths, two outcomes, but one truth. The past is a shackle only if you refuse to break it. And so I think that this theme, it isn't about blaming parents, even though in a way they are to blame, but it's about recognizing the moment you stop being a child of your circumstances and start being responsible for your own choices. And that turn from inheritance to accountability is where tragedy and redemption split. So again, we have one who is consumed and one who in the end breaks free of that. And so it's like the questions that are presented to us are, will you be consumed by your inheritance or will you rewrite it? Will you let the past devour you or will you live in active defiance, knowing that you can't erase what has been done or erase what you have done because of how you were engineered, because of how you were programmed, but still rewrite it? So the next point I want to bring up to you guys, which is why I highly recommend you read Remnants of Filth, is memory, identity, and the fragmented self. So in YUWU, memory loss and manipulation are never just like convenient plot devices. They are deeply tied to questions of identity, morality, and resilience. Characters are stripped of their pasts, their accomplishments, their sense of self, yet the story shows that even those who have had these things done to them, that their core can still survive. So one major character who loses everything, his name, his history, his role in the world, he, even with this fragmented mind, still gravitates toward a specific person. These are the main characters, obviously, at this moment, but he still gravitates toward the person that he loves. He, even in some cases, in the way that he can, tries to protect him and instinctively wants him to be happy. His loyalty and compassion reappears, not because he remembers anything, but because those qualities are just woven into his nature, not his memory. And so here we're seeing that YUWU is suggesting that love, morality, and instinctive goodness are not just learned behaviors, but they are embodied truths that we have, kind of like that nature versus nurture thing. This is just about nature, that people are capable of having certain attributes about them resurface, even when their conscious mind has been wiped clean because of trauma. Then we have a secondary couple who offers a mirrored perspective. One partner who is cursed and reshaped against their will is forced to live a life rewritten for them. And their partner, she literally chooses to scar herself, sacrificing her own safety to fight for years for him to have freedom from manipulation, for him to be free. And even when his memories are stripped away, there are fragments of the original self that refuse to disappear. And I mean, even though there was a part that changed because of this altering, nevertheless, when the nightmare finally ends, this person relearns who they are. And they're not alone. They still have that person beside them that never gave up on them. And so I say that in every major relationship in YUWU, which there are really just two major romantic relationships, we have it where memory becomes a form of protection and burden sharing. We have one person who will carry the truth while the other one is fragmented, sheltered, or kept in the dark. And this imbalance, it's not really about weakness. It's all very intentional. And in many cases, we're being shown an act of care, like I said, an act of protection, and an act of, in some cases, wanting to discover the whole truth to be able to provide that care and protection. And so we see that sometimes love means fighting to restore someone's memories because remembrance is necessary for healing, for justice, for survival. And other times, love means erasing or shielding someone from what they cannot yet bear so that they have a chance to live freely without being devoured by trauma, at least until they are at a point where they can face the truth. Ultimately, I would say that YUWU portrays memory not as a static archive of the past, but as a battleground where self is tested. A fragmented self is not necessarily a broken self or a useless self. It is just where courage and resilience are made to be forged. And often it is the people who stand beside us, those who choose to remember what we cannot, or those who choose to fight for the truth when we don't know what it is, those who pull us out of the darkness to help us become whole again. That is what I have gathered in regard to that. And so my last theme, which I don't know if this is my favorite theme or not, or what, I'm not really sure, but theme number 4 is on morality in Remnants of Filth. This is not black and white, but brutally human, okay? I think this is probably one of the most powerful elements in YUWU. And that is that it refuses to sort people strictly into just good and evil. I mean, we have what the irrelevant characters in like society thinks good and evil is. But overall, Meatbun writes a world where intent, trauma, love, circumstance, and choice all collide with each other. And morality becomes something that you have to wrestle with. It's not just something that is naturally inherited, but it's layered. So I'm going to tell you many different aspects of morality that YUWU gives us. First, we have a pure-hearted man who acted cruelly out of hurt. He loved someone very deeply. And when that love was betrayed or seemed to be betrayed, he weaponized his grief into anger. So his upset bursts and everything were not born from evilness, but just wounded devotion, if you will. Then we have another character who is a pure-hearted man who hurt the one he loved because he didn't know another path. This man, he never chose malice, ever. In fact, he chose sacrifice because he had a dream, a goal in mind for the greater good. And his silence, though, and his lies, his martyrdom, caused devastation. So it's one of those questions that, we ask, can good intentions still destroy? And the answer is very much yes. Yes, it can. And we have another man who justified atrocity with cynicism. So this person, which of course I'm trying to keep it as vague as possible, this person believed that the world is ugly. Therefore, his ugliness is truth. He is the voice of moral nihilism, basically the belief that cruelty is inevitable, so why bother resisting it? Becoming the very thing that you are accusing the rest of the world of being. Then we have 2 men who blamed their choices on circumstance. These 2 refuse to take accountability and or persevere in their circumstances. They twist the narrative so that they are forced into villainy by fate, by duty, by birthright, if you will. And their evil, I would say, is rooted in cowardice. It's not necessarily rooted in grief, but the refusal to face themselves, to face their circumstances and find a way to make things work with what they have rather than becoming evil, essentially. Then we have a man who is shaped by abuse, but chooses to rewrite himself. And this is an arduous journey. It takes many, many years. But this person proves that trauma, yes, explains behavior, but it does not excuse it. And the things that were done, I won't say that they're unforgivable, but this person chooses in the end to break the cycle, to become someone different than what their mother forged them into. And even more beautifully so, he shows that it's more than just no longer being that person, but actively making a choice to not reverse what was done, but to try to make sure it doesn't happen anymore. You know, kind of like from a scenario, as they say, it's not enough to no longer be a thief, but you need to give back to people. That is one of the things that takes place in here. And so then the last one for morality in this black and white and gray world, we have a man who committed harm for what he believed was for the greater good. So this person is ambitious, and I would say that they are sharpened by their patriotism. That is where all of their actions stem from. And yes, of course, there might be some selfish ambition within it, but it is for the country. And this is someone who stains their hands for the country, not necessarily ego, but because they feel like they are the rightful one. They are the ones who deserve to rule the country because they actually have good intentions and goals in mind for their land. So this person is not righteous. This person is not innocent. But I would argue that this person is also not a complete monster. Do they have the capacity to become a complete monster? Absolutely. But in the end, they did not. So I would say in YUWU, morality, again, it's not a spectrum from just literally black to white. It is a collision of grays in all different shades of grays, not 50 shades of gray, but each are shaped by love, by fear, ambition, despair, greed, obsession, all of these things. And so I feel like this story is not asking who is right so much as it's asking, when you are hurting, what will you do with that hurt? When you are powerless, what will you sacrifice to gain control? And when you love, will you cage, burn, heal, or free? That is what I get from this whole thing. That's what makes YUWU so devastating, but also so freaking real. No one here is born a villain, and no one is guaranteed to stay a hero. Morality is a choice, one that the people have to make over and over and over again. And even if you fail sometimes, even if you fall sometimes, there's still room for growth, room for improvement, room for redemption. So for this takeaway, I would say it's just teaching us that goodness is not about purity, but about persistence. Evil is not fate, but surrender. And redemption is only possible for those who choose to change, not those who are demanding forgiveness without reconcile. So again, if you are wondering if you should read YUWU, I strongly suggest it because you are being given some amazing themes here. You are being shown that love is redemption, not reward, and the shared burden of trauma. There is also a theme of parental curses, inherited sin, and the burden of ambition, and how people allow parental curses to consume them, while others may break free from what they were programmed to believe. There's also memory, identity, and the fragmented self, and how people respond to trauma, and morality. Not black and white, but the brutal truth of what humanity looks like. So I hope this was helpful for you in knowing whether or not you would like to read YUWU. It is a beautiful, exceptional read. Now, with that being said, I do want to provide you guys with trigger warnings because I know that in this series and even in all the other series I've seen, there aren't really any disclaimers within the books letting you know, hey, here are the trigger warnings for this series. So I'm going to provide you with that so you don't have to Google, so you don't have to ask your friends or anything like that. It is just right here. So of course, one of the trigger warnings is going to be war and violence. If that's not something that you like, then you may want to stay away from that, of course, because there are some battle scenes, there's death, there's gore, and just wartime brutality. War is ugly, and that is surrounding this entire story, right? There is also slavery and human trafficking. So if that is a sensitive subject for you, then you may not like that because there is some dehumanizing treatment in here, as well as a lot of harsh language in that arena. There is torture and physical abuse. So that's something to be leery of. There's also psychological trauma from gaslighting to coercion to humiliation and degradation. There's also memory manipulation and the loss of agency. So, yes. Then I'm not necessarily going to call it like suicide for sure, but there is self-sacrifice and suicidal ideation. So it's not something that's glorified, but it's tied to the trauma and the, character having self-sacrificial ideals. And then even like toward the end of the story, it's like, okay, well, what else is there to live for? So I do want to put that there, even though that's more so like, later on. So of course, I think it's pretty clear from my summary that there is child abuse. It's more so on the verbal side of things, even though I believe there was some physical child abuse for one of the characters as well. It maybe not all the time, but like once. So those are important triggers as well. And then I also just want to make it known that rape is a theme in this series. Is it heavy? No, like it's mentioned. There are attempts at rape for one character, although the people fail to do so because of a safety precaution the person has. But then there is mention of a character who had been raped, who had been violated, but nothing is written out explicitly. Like it's not written in detail. It is something that is mentioned. And there's also like another character who says that they have no interest in rape, but then it's contradicted by something else that they say. So I at least want to make you aware of that as well. One thing I do want to reassure you with, though, is that even though YUWU is dark, even though it is heavy, what it is not is torture for shock value, suffering for romance, and tragedy with no purpose. That's my personal opinion. It is a story about survival, healing, accountability, forgiveness, what real trauma looks like, rebuilding after devastation, and love as something earned rather than owed. So the darkness is there to like contrast, I guess, or to show the healing process, not to overshadow it. So again, I cannot stress enough that Remnants of Filth is a powerful story, but it is an emotionally heavy one. If you choose to read it, please take care of yourself along the way. Because of all these things that it deals with, it can be hard to read depending on what things trigger you. I had a hard time getting through it, even though I loved it. And in some ways, it helped me to deal with some trauma that I have. And in other ways, well, it didn't hurt my healing process, but it was very hard to get through. So it's totally okay if you need to pause, to step away, or protect your peace. I do know of a group that I'm in. One of the ladies was like, I have to step away because I am mentally not in the right space to read it right now. So that is something that I think you should be aware of should you decide to dive into this story. And if any of those trigger warnings that I mentioned, if you're like in the beginning stages of dealing with trauma in those areas, then I would just hold off on reading YUWU for the time being. I mean, you can give it a shot because who knows, it may help you through, but just take care of your mental health is all I'm saying. So anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this not so generic breakdown or not so generic summary on why you should read Remnants of Filth or YUWU by Robabu Chiro or Meatbun. And you all have an excellent day or night. I will see you all next time, and